Hello, everyone. This is Gary Jost, and with me is Dr. Steve Delamarter. Today, we're going to talk about the THEOT text viewer, which is a tool that the THEOT team created. We'll talk about the viewer and how to use it. What we want to explain today will provide an overview of the THEOT text viewer and its various functionalities, and then also give a demonstration of its use.
So this is the script we're going to use, but right now we'll pull up the text viewer and jump right in.
So what you see here is the THEOT text viewer. Several things to notice. One is the big gray box, which is where the text will be displayed. And at the top, there's a drop down with the various Old Testament books that you can select. There is a slider bar. I'll mention that. You can slide it down. There are several more texts there. And for today's demo, we're going to pick the book of Ruth.
Before we go into Ruth, we'll notice the syntax, so to speak, of the options that are given. So it begins with the name of the book in Ge'ez and then in English. And you'll notice that the options here are basically of two types. There are books where we have done the entire book. So, for instance, the book of Ruth here, and then others where we have done merely a sample of the book. In each case, it'll tell you if it's the entire book or a sample, and then it'll tell you the number of manuscripts that make up the sample that we use. So now we'll go into the book of Ruth.
Okay, select the book and click display. And what you see here in the display area is the text of the book of Ruth. We've divided each verse up into parts to facilitate some of our other processes. But you can take a look here at, for Ruth, we did the entire book of Ruth since it's a small book. It also explains which text here is being displayed exactly. We choose the best representative of the earliest attested, which in this case is Davies Deborah Bazan 1. And we note that it's a 16th century manuscript. The next step is to click on one of the verse references. So Ruth 1:1a. And what this does is it brings up the readings of all the different manuscripts organized according to cluster. Okay, and so this first 6 manuscripts there, the cluster that they belong to is the earliest attested 1, and then you see the various other clusters. And several things to note here. One is in many cases, most cases in fact, every manuscript has a word in a column, has a reading there, and there are many columns that have where every manuscript has a reading. And we also notice that some of the columns have a single manuscript. And so this is a unique reading or an idiosyncratic reading. And it's useful to note the column numbers at the top. This helps when we're analyzing and describing what's going on. So I can say, for instance, in column 1, all of the words, all of the manuscripts have the same reading. And in column 2, there's only one manuscript that has a reading. You see the same thing in column 5, and then finally also in column 10. Let's go to select 1:2a. You see how you can select whichever verse part you're looking at. And what we see here, again, in many cases, all, or actually in this case, almost all of them have the reading. And also in columns 5 to 7, the newer manuscripts have those 3 words and the name of his wife, Naomi. But some of the older manuscripts are missing a reading there.
There's several other functions that are available to us in the text viewer. And one is the ability to see the presence of secondary hands at work in scribal intervention, intervening in the text to fix it for some reason or another. So for instance, parentheses indicates the addition of text often interlinearly in a secondary hand. So we notice several of these um, earliest attested text form manuscripts. So all of these are manuscripts of the earliest attested text form. Many of them, or 5 or 6 here, have the addition of this reading in it. And we notice that with parentheses. Other signals like square brackets, there are in other places, not on this page, curly brackets. Each of those have a slightly different meaning. So it's possible just visually to carry out a study of scribal intervention in a book. Maya Priest was kind enough to help us do a little pilot study for the Book of Judges, and there's a video on the website here that illustrates what you can do just with a close look at these signals. We see other things here that are of interest to us. And the first is this really very abrupt and different 3 words, and her name of the wife is Naomi. It just appears not to exist except for these ones, and we're wondering kind of what's going on here. When we look closely at it, we see that all of these manuscripts, except for one that we'll talk about in a moment, are manuscripts that were copied in the 17th century and later. So they're copies of the text form that was produced in the 14th to the 16th century, with the exception of these. So we see EMML 6557 was copied in 1894. EMDA was copied in the 19th century. EMML 1842 was copied in the 17th century, and it has that text form in the base hand. Likewise, another intervention in 1768 in EMML 2388. So all 4 of these are clearly late copies of the earliest attested text form. The earliest attested text form, once again, being 14th to 16th centuries. These manuscripts are copied. They're trying to copy the earliest attested text form, but they have this reading floating around in the air in the standardized texts around them. And we judge it to be examples of backward influence from the later text form back into the manuscripts of the late copies of the earliest text form. One example or one exception, and it's always an exception, Cambridge Additional 1570, is the one exception to this rule, because at times it appears to anticipate the readings of the standardized text. In the case of this book, however, it's mainly an example of the earliest attested text form. So Cambridge Additional 1570 often behaves idiosyncratically in certain kinds of ways. Very interesting manuscript, very important manuscript, but a manuscript that is not actually representative, a good representative of any of the text forms, the main text forms in the textual history of the Ethiopic Old Testament. There's a couple of exceptions to that statement, but usually that's a true statement. Finally, we'll notice a larger lacuna here in BL 480, which is a very important manuscript in the book of Deuteronomy, for instance. That manuscript was the best representative of the earliest attested text form 1, EA1, which makes it, the best witness to the oldest text form that we have. In the Book of Ruth, however, it's in a different place. And in this case, we have actually a full lacuna across the whole thing. A few comments about the tool and its usefulness. There's no better tool that we've found for the study of textual history than to have this kind of a viewer that enables you to see everything going on in the textual history. Very grateful to Dr. Jost for conceiving how to put this thing together and then doing the work to put it together. But we commend its use to you because we have found it so useful in our work on the textual history of the Ethiopic Old Testament. Thank you for your time.